The sound of gunfire shattered the desert silence. Blood sprayed across weathered wooden walls as Wyatt Hawkins crashed to the floor of the ranch house, crimson spreading across his shirt. The tall Apache woman named Aida stood motionless in the shadowed corner, her dark eyes fixed on the dying man. Her face betrayed nothing, not fear, not sympathy, not satisfaction, just watchful patience, like a hawk observing a wounded rabbit. Arizona Territory, 1879. The land still carried the ghosts of war, both the great conflict between North and South, and the endless smaller wars that continued to rage across the frontier. 2 years had passed since the Army had forced the Apache from their ancestral lands, scattering them like dust before the wind. The Raven Ridge Ranch sprawled across 500 acres of prime grazing land, water rights secured by both law and gunfire. Its owner, Thomas Reynolds, former captain in the Missouri Transport Corps during the war between the states, had built an empire on the backs of others. His weathered face, creased by sun and cruelty, rarely softened into anything resembling kindness. "Keep him alive," Reynolds had ordered Aida earlier that day, gesturing toward the wounded stranger they'd found near the South Creek. "He owes me for the doctor's visit and medicine." His cold eyes had narrowed as he added, "Let him die, and you'll follow him." Now, as Aida knelt beside Wyatt Hawkins, she studied the wound with detached precision. The 44-40 round from a Winchester Model 1873 had torn through muscle and lodged against his rib cage. Infection had already set in, turning the edges of the wound an angry red. Fever glazed the man's eyes, but consciousness still flickered behind them. He watched her every movement with the wariness of a predator, even in his weakened state. His body told stories his lips had not, scars from knife fights, bullet wounds, and the unmistakable mark of an Apache arrow across his shoulder. This man had fought her people before, yet something in his steady gaze held neither hatred nor fear, just a soldier's acceptance of the battlefield's cruel arithmetic. As she cleaned his wound, her fingers brushed against something metal in his inner pocket. Wyatt's hand shot up with surprising speed, gripping her wrist with iron strength despite his fever. Their eyes locked in silent combat. "Leave it," he rasped, voice dry as desert sand. Aida held his gaze without flinching. She had survived worse than a wounded white man's grip. When he finally released her, she continued cleaning without comment. But she had seen enough, the edge of a Pinkerton Detective Agency badge, partially concealed in his pocket. This was no ordinary drifter. As she worked, she noticed his other hand remained beneath the blanket. Fingers likely wrapped around the Colt single-action Army revolver she'd spotted earlier. Even dying, this man was dangerous. The door creaked open. Samuel Webb, Reynolds' foreman and gunman, filled the frame. His lips curled into a smirk beneath his mustache as he studied the scene. "Playing nurse to the half-dead stranger?" Webb drawled. "Reynolds wants to know if he'll live to work off his debt." "Too soon to tell," Aida replied, her English precise and measured. She had learned the white man's tongue during her 2 years of captivity at Raven Ridge. Webb stepped closer, spurs jingling against the wooden floor. "What's your hurry to save him, anyway? One less white man in the world wouldn't trouble you none, I expect." Aida remained silent, wringing excess water from her cloth. She had learned that silence was often the safest response. Webb's hand suddenly shot out, grabbing her chin and forcing her face upward. "When I speak to you, Apache, you answer." "Mr. Reynolds gave orders," she said evenly. "I follow them." Webb's grip tightened briefly before he released her with a disgusted shove. "Keep an eye on this one," he muttered. "Something ain't right about him." His spurs clinked as he departed, leaving the door ajar. That night, as fever gripped Wyatt Hawkins, his consciousness slipped between present and past. Aida bathed his forehead, watching as his lips formed words in delirium. "Blackwood," he muttered, thrashing against invisible enemies. "Found you, Executioner Blackwood." Aida froze, claw suspended above his brow. The name struck her like a physical blow. Executioner Blackwood, leader of the raid that had massacred her family, her entire band. The man with the scarred face, who had laughed as her people fell. The monster who had executed the tribal elders one by one, making the children watch. She stared at the delirious man with new understanding. This Pinkerton detective was hunting the same demon who haunted her nightmares. As Wyatt's fevered ravings continued, pieces began fitting together Blackwood's trail of bloodshed along the border, the bounty on his head, the string of land grabs that followed his massacres. By morning, Wyatt's fever burned hotter. His skin glowed with unhealthy heat, and his breathing had grown shallow. Aida knew the signs without quinine. Infection would claim him within days. She approached Reynolds in the main house, standing respectfully at the entrance to his study. "The wounded man needs medicine from town," she stated simply. "Quinine." Reynolds barely glanced up from his ledger. "He's already cost me more than he's worth. He will die without it." Reynolds finally looked at her, annoyance creasing his features. "And that concerns me how, exactly?" "You said to keep him alive." "I've changed my mind. Let nature take its course." He returned to his ledger. "Now get back to your duties." Aida left without argument, her mind already calculating distances and risks. 15 miles to Copper Springs, across open country where a lone Apache woman would be prey to any man she encountered. She had no money, nothing of value except the intricate beadwork she had managed to keep hidden from Reynolds. Martha, the ranch's cook, found Aida packing a small bundle later that morning. "You're going for his medicine, aren't you?" the older woman asked, her voice low. Aida didn't bother denying it. "He will die otherwise." Martha studied her for a long moment. "Reynolds does business with dangerous men. I've seen them come at night, men who don't want to be seen in daylight." She pressed a small coin into Aida's palm. "Be careful in town. Not everyone is an enemy." The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Aida traveled, staying clear of the main trails. She rationed water carefully, moving with the efficiency of one who had traversed harsh terrain her entire life. A knife remained concealed in the folds of her skirt, small protection against the dangers she might face. By mid-afternoon, the buildings of Copper Springs rose from the shimmering heat. Aida drew her shawl closer, keeping her eyes lowered as she navigated the dusty streets. Men paused in conversation to watch her pass, some with open hostility, others with something worse. The general store bell jangled as she entered. The storekeeper looked up, his expression souring instantly. "We don't serve Indians here," he said flatly. "Get out." Aida placed her beadwork and Martha's coin on the counter. "Quinine?" she said simply. The storekeeper made no move toward the medicine shelf. "Are you deaf? I said we don't." "She's with me," came a voice from behind. Martha stood in the doorway, market basket over one arm. "The medicines for Raven Ridge Ranch." The storekeeper's demeanor shifted slightly. "Reynolds sending an Apache to do his business now?" "The medicine," Martha repeated firmly. As the storekeeper reluctantly measured out quinine, Aida's attention was drawn to men gathering outside the saloon across the street. Among them stood Reynolds himself, deep in conversation with a stranger in an expensive coat. Curious, she edged closer to the store's window. "McCready's place will burn tomorrow night," the stranger was saying. "Once it's gone, the water rights revert to the county. You'll have no trouble securing them." Reynolds nodded, satisfaction evident even at this distance. "Just make it clean. No survivors, no questions." Aida felt cold recognition wash over her. This was the same pattern, the same method Blackwood had used when clearing Apache lands. First fire, then water rights, then new ownership. Reynolds was not just doing business with Blackwood, he was orchestrating the same brutal land grab strategy. On the return journey, thoughts churned behind Aida's impassive exterior. If Reynolds was connected to Blackwood, what was the wounded Pinkerton's role? Was he truly hunting Blackwood, or was this some elaborate deception? When she reached the ranch house, she found Wyatt conscious but struggling for breath. His eyes followed her movements as she prepared the quinine. "You went to town," he stated, voice cracked from fever. She nodded, helping him drink the bitter medicine. "Why risk yourself for a stranger?" he asked after swallowing with difficulty. Aida met his gaze directly. "You hunt Blackwood." Surprise flashed across his face before being quickly masked. "What do you know of Blackwood?" "He killed my family, my entire band." Her voice remained steady, though the memory threatened to choke her. 2 years ago, near the Ghost Mountains. Understanding dawned in Wyatt's eyes. The Ghost Mountain Massacre. 7 lodges, 34 dead. 35? She corrected. My brother died later of his wounds. Wyatt studied her with new intensity. I'm tracking him for the Pinkerton Agency. 6 massacres in 3 territories. Over 100 dead. Always the same pattern, isolated homesteads or small bands of natives wiped out, land changing hands shortly after. Aida placed a cool cloth on his forehead. I saw Reynolds in town today, planning the burning of a place called McCready's. Wyatt tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. When? Tomorrow night. He fell back against the pillow, frustration evident. I need to warn them, need to send word. You can barely stand, she observed. I could at 12, he replied grimly. Hit a dime at 50 yards with my father's Colt. His hand moved to check his gun beneath the blanket. Still can. Over the next day, as the quinine fought back Wyatt's fever, they formed an uneasy alliance. Aida showed him how to read the subtle warning signs her people had used for generations, patterns in bird flight, arrangements of small stones to signal danger. In turn, Wyatt taught her the mechanics of his revolver, explaining the weapon's quirks and capabilities. 6 shots, he explained, voice stronger now. Never count on the 6th hammer sometimes catches if the cylinder isn't perfectly clean. Together, they strung a system of small bells around the perimeter of the ranch house, an Apache early warning system. Webb watched their activities with growing suspicion, reporting daily to Reynolds. That evening, Wyatt checked his Winchester rifle only to discover someone had tampered with it. The firing pin had been slightly filed, and several bullets had been replaced with blanks. Someone's expecting trouble, he murmured, inspecting each round carefully. Or planning it, Aida added. Reynolds summoned them both to his office the following day. He sat behind his massive desk, Webb standing at his shoulder like a trained attack dog. Towns talking, Reynolds began without preamble. About my Apache servant nursing a white man day and night, about her trading beadwork for his medicine. His cold eyes shifted from Aida to Wyatt. Makes a man wonder what's so special about a drifter with a bullet wound. Wyatt met his gaze steadily. Just lucky, I guess. Reynolds leaned forward. I don't believe in luck, Mr. Hawkins. I believe in debts, and you've accumulated quite a large one. I'll work it off, Wyatt replied evenly. You misunderstand. I'm not interested in your labor anymore. Reynolds gestured toward Aida. She's become a distraction, drawing attention. It's time she moved on. She saved my life, Wyatt said, voice hardening. And that makes her your concern. How, exactly? Reynolds smiled thinly. She's my property, not yours. No man owns another, Wyatt stated, hand drifting closer to his concealed revolver. Not anymore. Reynolds' smile vanished. This is my ranch. I decide who stays and who goes. Wyatt rose slowly, pain evident in his movements, but determination in his eyes. If she goes, I go too. His hand now rested openly on his holstered Colt. And I'll be taking all I know about your operations straight to the federal marshal in Tucson. The room froze in silent tension. Webb's hand hovered near his own weapon, eyes locked on Wyatt. After a long moment, Reynolds forced a laugh. No need for dramatic gestures, Hawkins. The woman can stay for now. His eyes narrowed. But watch yourself. Accidents happen on the frontier. That night, Wyatt and Aida prepared for trouble. They both knew Reynolds' retreat was temporary. He'll move against us soon, Wyatt said, checking his revolver for the 3rd time. Probably tonight. Aida nodded, arranging small mirrors near the windows to catch lamplight and alert them to movement outside. The McCready farm burns tonight. He will be distracted. Not if I can help it, Wyatt muttered, scribbling a hasty note. He called Martha to the room, speaking in low tones as he handed her the folded paper. This needs to reach the McCready farm before nightfall, And if you can, stop at the telegraph office in town. Send this message to Marshall Davis in Tucson." Martha nodded gravely, tucking the papers into her apron. "The ranch hands should know too. Reynolds has kept them in the dark about burning out their neighbors." "Tell them," Wyatt agreed. "But quietly. We'll need their help before this is over." As darkness settled over the ranch, the warning bells Aida had strung jangled softly in the night breeze. Both froze, listening intently. Another jingle not from wind, but from deliberate movement. Wyatt moved to the window, staying in shadow. Riders. At least 5. Aida joined him, her sharp eyes picking out details in the darkness. "Webb leads them." Wyatt checked his gun one final time. "Stay behind me." "I fight my own battles," she replied, producing a knife and small bow she had kept hidden beneath the floorboards. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, waiting as footsteps approached. The door crashed open, kicked in by Webb's boot. He entered, revolver drawn, only to find the room apparently empty. "Check the back," he called to men outside. As he turned, Wyatt's voice cut through the darkness. "Looking for someone, Webb?" Webb spun, firing toward the voice. The shot went wild as Aida's arrow struck his arm. Wyatt stepped from the shadows, Colt leveled at Webb's chest. "Drop it," Wyatt commanded. Webb's lips curled in a snarl. "You're dead already, Pinkerton. You just don't know it yet." "I know more than you think," Wyatt replied. "About Reynolds, about the land grabs, about you." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Webb's face. Outside, gunfire erupted as the other riders engaged with something unexpected. "Your men are finding the ranch hands less cooperative than anticipated," Wyatt explained. "While you were in town planning the McCready raid, I sent Martha with messages. The ranch hands didn't take kindly to learning about Reynolds' plan to burn out their neighbors. I also had her stop at the telegraph office to alert the marshal in Tucson. Earlier that day, knowing Reynolds and Webb would be occupied with the McCready farm, Wyatt had taken the risk. Despite his weakened state, he'd written detailed notes about the land-grabbing operation and entrusted Martha to deliver them both to the ranch hands and to the telegraph operator who owed him a favor from a previous case. The door burst open again as Reynolds himself entered, pistol in hand. "Webb, what the hell is Dodd?" He stopped short at the tableau before him. "It's over, Reynolds," Wyatt said calmly. "The McCready farm is defended. The marshal's been telegraphed. Your arrangement with Blackwood is finished." Reynolds' face twisted in rage. "You understand nothing. This territory respects only one thing: power. I built this ranch from nothing." "You built it on blood," Aida interjected, bow still trained on Webb. "On stolen land and murdered families." Reynolds laughed bitterly. "As if your people didn't fight for territory? As if they didn't raid and kill?" He gestured contemptuously. "This land belongs to whoever's strong enough to hold it." "Enough," Webb suddenly barked, his voice changing, hardening into something colder. "You talk too much, Reynolds." Reynolds turned in surprise. "What are you?" The gunshot exploded in the confined space as Webb fired point blank into Reynolds' chest. The rancher crumpled, shock frozen on his face. Webb turned toward Wyatt, a new calculating coldness in his eyes. "You've been hunting Blackwood for months, Pinkerton. Did it never occur to you to look closer to home?" Understanding dawned on Wyatt's face. "You're Blackwood." Webb, or rather Blackwood, smiled thinly, revealing the scar that stretched from his mouth to his ear, partially hidden by his mustache. "At your service, Reynolds was useful for a time, provided legitimacy, connections, but he was becoming problematic." Aida stared at the man who had destroyed her family, her entire world. "You killed children," she said, voice trembling with contained rage. "Made them watch as you executed our elders." "Business," Blackwood replied dispassionately. "Nothing personal." In one fluid motion, he raised his gun toward Aida. Wyatt fired first, the bullet striking Blackwood's shoulder. The killer staggered but didn't fall, returning fire as he dove for cover behind Reynolds' body. The room erupted in gunfire. Wyatt and Blackwood exchanged shots, splinters flying from furniture and walls. Aida circled behind, silent as a shadow, her knife ready. Blackwood, sensing movement, whirled to fire at her. The moment's distraction was all Wyatt needed. His bullet caught Blackwood square in the chest, driving him backward against the wall. The killer slid down, leaving a crimson streak on the whitewashed surface. "You should have killed me at Ghost Mountain," Blackwood gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "I wasn't there," Wyatt replied, keeping his gun trained on the dying man. "But I was," Aida said quietly, stepping into Blackwood's fading field of vision. "I watched you murder my family. I remembered your face, every day for 2 years." Recognition flickered in Blackwood's eyes. The girl, under the wagon. His laugh turned into a bloody cough. Should've. Check more carefully. His head lolled forward as the last breath left his body. Outside, the gunfire had ceased. Dawn light filtered through the windows as the local marshal and his deputies secured the remaining members of Blackwood's gang. Thanks to Martha's telegraph message and Wyatt's detailed notes, law enforcement had arrived just in time to surround the property as the shootout began. The McCready family, warned by the ranch hand Wyatt had dispatched with a message the previous day, had not only successfully defended their farm, but had come to witness justice being served. Their gratitude was palpable as they stood in Reynolds' once imposing study, now stained with the blood of 2 men who had plotted their demise. "We owe you our lives," McCready told Wyatt, hat in hand. "The whole valley does." Wyatt shook his head. "I was just doing my job." His eyes found Aida, who stood apart from the gathering crowd. "She's the one who saved your farm and my life." In the days that followed, as Pinkerton agents and federal marshals unraveled Blackwood and Reynolds' operation, evidence emerged of their involvement in land grabs across 3 territories. Property deeds were restored to rightful owners. Justice, so rare on the frontier, briefly showed its face. The townspeople of Copper Springs gathered for a meeting at the church. After years of Reynolds' shadow hanging over their community, a palpable sense of relief permeated the air. The revelation that Webb, a man who had drunk in their saloons and walked their streets, was actually the notorious Blackwood shocked everyone. "We need someone who stands for law," Mayor Henderson declared. "Someone who's proven they'll face down evil, no matter the cost." All eyes turned to Wyatt, who stood at the back of the room, still favoring his healing wound. "Copper Springs needs a marshal," Henderson continued. "Someone who can ensure this never happens again." After consideration, Wyatt accepted the badge, not for glory or power, but because he understood what lawlessness cost. He'd seen its price in blood. The McCreadys, learning of Aida's role in saving their farm, approached her after the meeting. Mrs. McCready, eyes damp with gratitude, pressed a folded deed into Aida's hands. "This parcel by the creek," she explained softly, "it was part of your people's land once. It should be again." Aida stared at the document, her first legitimate claim to any part of her ancestral homeland, something no one could take from her by force. On the porch of the small cabin that now stood on that land, Wyatt sat cleaning his revolver as Aida returned from the creek. They had established an unusual partnership, not quite friendship, certainly not romance, but something forged in blood and fire. "I owe you my life," Wyatt said simply, breaking their companionable silence. Aida looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "You owe no one anything, but if you want to stay, stay." Wyatt holstered his weapon and gazed toward the distant mountains where Ghost Mountain cast its shadow. "I'm staying," he said with finality. The words sealed a bond neither had sought, but both had chosen. In a land where most relationships were forced by circumstance or desperation, theirs was built on the rarest foundation of all free choice. The Arizona sun set behind them, painting the desert in gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for now, they had claimed this small piece of the borderland, not just with blood, but with honor.